yards. At Huntercombe roundabout, take the first exit onto Huntercombe Spur heading to M4, London. Exit the roundabout onto Huntercombe Spur. Keep left at the fork. In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M4.
That they heard him grunting, a clear sign of meningitis, and still they waited, and they waited until it was nearly too late.
Do you mind my asking, was Adam your first child?
Yes, Adam was my first, and ultimately, because of those experiences, my only. My husband had another son from his previous marriage, but for me, it was my first, and we'd always intended to have more. But because of those experiences, I was just too frightened and too traumatized to go there again.
What was the chat between the other mums? Were many of you questioning or complaining of the care you were getting or not getting?
To be perfectly honest, at the actual point of Adam's birth, I was both incredibly weak from having hemorrhaged, and then very, very quickly, once, I'm talking the following day, but once Adam was taken to intensive care, life support coma, the whole 9 yards, at that point I was put in a side room on my own. And certainly that was a good thing, it needed to be. But at the same time, I didn't then have the opportunity really to talk to other mothers until probably about day 20, when I was finally seeing some of the other mums who are, oh, you know, isn't it wonderful that we've got newborn babies, that kind of thing, with me sitting there going, yep, mine's in intensive care. Yeah, it was awful.
What does yesterday's Ockenden report mean to you?
It is a hugely, hugely valuable moment of feeling as though parents like me and the 1,500 odd other parents involved are finally being listened to, because it was the case for me and for so many others that I left hospital not realizing, hang on a second, they should have been investigating, and thinking, well, it was just a fluke, it was just bad luck, it was just perhaps down to national policy to not test for group B strep rather than what the hospital was doing. And for such a long time, I was in that place rather than having any idea that I was not alone and I was not the only one. So yesterday turned the tide conclusively in that sense.
Finally, Reverend, you're a person of faith. Can you forgive that hospital trust?
Oh, that's a big question, and certainly not the first time I've been asked it. I think what I would have to should be, but give me time.
You've got a day. You give my best to Adam. He looks a smashing little fella, and the picture's in the paper. Thank you so much. Charlotte, Cheshire. Mother's son Adam was left severely disabled by this. 14 after 7. So what now for the mums, and indeed, of course, the dads as well? Laura Preston is principal lawyer and team leader in the team at Slater and Gordon, acting for families suffering as a result. What legal recourse is there? Good morning to you.
Good morning. In the UK, the only legal recourse really in this scenario is to pursue litigation, which hopefully would result in compensation for families like Charlotte and Adam, who obviously are left in a position where if care has let them down, they are needing very practical and very expensive care and assistance for those children, or for injuries suffered by mums. So that's what the law can offer them, which obviously in a tragic scenario like this only goes some of the way. The trauma is much wider than that.
This is your area of speciality. Have you ever seen anything like this before?
No, not on this scale, and not certainly with the level of repetition over such a long period of time, and some of the aspects of the failings that were identified by Donna's report, blaming mothers, blaming families where things have gone wrong, not investigating, repeatedly not doing those things, and then also none of this being picked up by so-called external scrutiny. Really shocking.
Does it speak to a culture at the hospital, the trust?
I think without doubt, I think over 20 years you can't conclude anything else. I think it's systemic and cultural failure.
And ultimately, what needs to come out of this, would you say, so that other mums and indeed dads don't suffer this kind of ordeal?
I think it's absolutely essential that the recommendations of the report are put into action. But I think that has to be at a level in the Shrewsbury Trust and also nationally. I think the staffing level shortage must be looked at urgently. This is a problem we're seeing in all trusts. And I think that there has to be returning scrutiny that really gets to the heart of the issues, and a change in culture in the NHS, which means that when people speak up, they're not fearing the consequences, because it's clear that people did try to speak up in some instances at Shrewsbury and Telford, and they were too frightened to, or they were silenced, and that's very dangerous.
Laura Preston, thank you. Your team leader at the team at Slater Gordon, acting for the families. Please God, none of you have ever endured that. But have you been a pressured mum into not being allowed a cesarean, or having a cesarean, or having some kind of process that wasn't needed, particularly at that crucial moment as you're about to give birth? Take your calls on that. Also coming up after the news, dead and all too young.
Make you glad you came. The sun goes down, the stars come out.
The wanted star Tom Parker dies from brain cancer, just aged 33. 7:15 LBC News headlines, Simon Conway.
British intelligence suggests Russia has continued with significant shelling around the Ukrainian city of Chernihiv, despite its promise to cut back military activity in the area. A new reports concluded ministers aren't meeting their commitments to improve cancer care in England. And the organisers of the Oscars say Will Smith was asked to leave Sunday's show after hitting Chris Rock, but refused. LBC weather, feeling cold with a mix of sunny spells and wintry showers, a high of 9 degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm Anne-Marie Walsh on the M25 anti-clockwise. It's queuing for nearly an hour from junction 29 at Romford towards 27 for the M11 following emergency resurfacing works. On the M1 southbound, it's queuing for 7 miles towards an accident. That's after junction 11 for Luton. Shelbourne Road in Tottenham is blocked both ways. That's near to Halefield Road for an investigation. And in Kingsbury, the Mall is closed in both directions between Preston Hill and the Garth following an accident there. In Holloway, on Hill Martin Road, the traffic light's not working at North Road. If you're heading that way, do approach the area with care. And on the trains, there's no service on the DLR between Poplar and Canary Wharf because of a power failure.
This is LBC.
Just by buying fresh fruit and veg at Tesco last July, you helped us donate 3 million meals to kids in your community. And right now, we need your help again. So, whether you're popping in for broccoli and bananas, mushrooms or mangoes, you'll be making a big difference to a lot of little lives. Tesco.
stolen lives in maternity scandal. For the Daily Express, justice coming now for every baby. The Guardian, NHS maternity scandal. Police investigate 600 further cases. The Times, this is, by the way, if you are a mum, or soon to be mum, childbirth, quotes, is not safe for women in England. This is the headline, by the way. This is what someone in the report has actually said. That's why she's quoting England. Would you concur with that? The Daily Mail, natural birth dogma left mothers and babies to die. Very powerful headlines. Quickly through the remaining front, and the Iron, sort of biggest maternity scandal in history of the NHS. The remaining front pages. The Metro has the rape ordeal of the Conservative MP Jamie Wallace, who's come out as transgender. He tells of a £50,000 blackmail plot, so best wishes to him as he now goes through that transition in his life. The Daily Telegraph is in Ukraine, that Putin's aides are lying to him. Probably not really that surprising. And lastly, the Sun, big, well, it's a showbiz and sports story actually. David Beckham.
In 2 miles, at junction 3, take the A312 exit to Harrow, Hayes.
And just briefly, yeah, the papers also report, sadly, the former Chief Constable of Leicestershire, Simon Cole, has been found dead. It is suspected he's taken his life. I had the privilege of speaking, I know Mr. Cole, I knew Mr. Cole quite well, and actually attended a couple of police events with him. He was most charming, but very, very, a great, great company. So desperately sad news, and my condolences, obviously, to his family at this time. Back to the story, the LBC website, of course, leads that justice is coming for every baby. Says the LBC website on this. Let's put that to Chris in Richmond on Thames. Chris, what's your story? Good morning.
Yeah, obviously it's a dad's story, not my story, but August was born in 2010, and so my wife was 38 weeks pregnant, and she had what's called a transverse line, basically lying across, swimming around, and having up to fluid, basically. It's like being in a lovely warm bath.
So neither legs or head is presented to get the baby out, is that the issue here?
Basically, yeah, that's what the situation is. And this is obviously 38 weeks, is basically what's called term.
Yeah.
So they said, we're going to just tell her the baby, and there was no kind of explanation of the risks. And then she ends up going back in hospital 2 or 3 days later.
Sorry, I don't want to be too graphic about your work. Sorry, how do they turn, do they do that internally? How do they turn a baby?
Basically by kind of massaging your tummy, basically.
Oh, right. Okay.
Excruciating and painful, but the risks were never explained properly. And then, surprise, 2 days later, she goes back in. But, when I wrote an article about this a few years ago, because we decided to have a second one on board, because the combination of that and the frankly appalling aftercare when the child wouldn't feed properly, wasn't great. But also, there's the issue here from a culture perspective. If staff cannot speak up, if NHS trust or they're ignored, people are going to give up and not bother.
What would you tell other mums to be, or dads to be? What should they look out for? What advice would you give, Chris?
I think ask all the questions. Don't just rely on the NCT, frankly, which I think was a complete waste of time. Ask every single question about every single procedure. When they stick that piece of paper in front of you, make sure you know what it is you're signing up to. But also, if you want to...
In a quarter of a mile, at junction 3, take the A312 exit to Harrow, Hayes.
NCTs are the National Childbirth Trust. These pre-labour courses where it's, the baby doesn't breastfeed, then it's like you're bad mum.
Right.
No, nothing to do when you arrive at home on a 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning with a baby that won't breastfeed.
Right.
You have to have the same breast milk.
Exit at junction 3.
In hospital. Just very basic things as to what to do. They don't teach you any of that.
Best wishes to your wife, obviously now through that.
In a quarter of a mile, at Cranford Parkway interchange, take the 4th exit onto the Parkway, A312.
Safe for women in England. I appreciate it. Maybe very upsetting, and indeed you may want to give us names of the radio false names. We can make all that happen for you. Thank you for that. More calls coming, but let's turn to other matters. And I mentioned the fact that the Prime Minister was before a particular committee today, liaison committee. He took questions on a series of matters. Pete Wishart was asking questions in his role as chair of the Scottish Affairs Committee.
Just talk about your leadership in the maternity. I was in rock and roll for 15 years. I could never even start to compete and keep up with activities number 10 under lockdown and the party culture that you created. Who's responsible for all
You
this?
see, that is, I hear you, Pete, but if I may say so, that is a very good illustration. Your question is a very good illustration of why it is important that we should wait to the conclusion of the investigation.
Of course it is, Prime Minister. Let's turn to today's Daily Telegraph. Dangerous liaisons. PM suffers at the hands of Commons firing squad. This is sketch writer Madeline Grant's piece, who joins me now. Do you think he had a torrid time then, Madeline? Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I think to a certain extent, these things are always a bit of a torrid time. The liaison committee is it's a sort of, I think it happens about 2 or 3 times a year. The Prime Minister has to go up in front of all of the different heads of every select committee and just be grilled on every matter that could possibly have gone wrong. So it's never going to be a cakewalk, but I definitely thought this one was particularly excruciating to watch and sketch. And then we're almost in the sort of Jeremy Paxman and Michael Howard territory of him being repeatedly asked the same question and mumbling and shuffling and giving the kind of non-answer that we just heard there between him and Pete Wishart. So in general,
Exit the roundabout onto the parkway.
Equally, that is sort of the nature of the beast of the liaison committee. I don't think I've ever seen one that went well for anyone.
You mentioned Mr. Wishart. You also
Continue on the parkway for 1 mile.
Today, Madeline. Who do you think landed some punches on the PM?
Well, I would say that's a good question. Probably, I actually think that probably Pete Wishart, in the sense that they had to kind of divvy up the questions, so not everyone could go in on Partygate, otherwise it wouldn't have covered the important topics that needed to be discussed. So in a way, he sort of had an advantage there because he was given the obvious, excruciating topic shortly after the issuing of these fixed penalty notices. So it was kind of likely that he would land more of a punch. Tom Tugendhat is interesting because he, in many ways, is kind of temperamentally a complete opposite of the Prime Minister, and he has a tendency to ask very detailed questions that kind of partly there to show off, I think, his superior knowledge. He does rather bask in his knowledge of foreign affairs, as they all do. I mean, there's a lot of panto involved in this. But that's, again, he doesn't really go for the gotchas in the way that other MPs do. He just kind of asks the Prime Minister very difficult questions that would be difficult for anyone to answer and then watches him kind of floundering.
Read all about it and how fertiliser came to the aid of the Prime Minister in Madeline's piece in the paper today. Madeline Grant is sketch writer for the Daily Telegraph. Madeline, thank you for that. 7:29. Let's come back to the idea that childbirth is not safe for women in England. I hate that. I'm sorry about this if you're living in Wales or Scotland.
In a quarter of a mile, at Wagoners Roundabout, take the second exit and stay on the parkway, A312.
For want of a better word, fight for both of the Caesarean sections that were elected that my wife chose, but that for us was part of the NHS pathway that we needed to make sure that we fought for, and that was fine.
Exit the roundabout onto the parkway. Continue on A312 for 1.5 miles.
My daughters too, and my wife is still in touch and goes for regular meals with her NTT pals from her NTT group, and I just think, well, there just needs to be a little bit of balance here. I completely find, I agree and I accept that there will be cultures and there'll be problems in aspects of it that are in all national organisations.
What do you think the NCT gave you or your wife? What did they provide for?
What was great about the NCT was that we kind of, for a number of meetings, we sat in basically in a circle. Dads got together and got to have those conversations for the first time about what are you looking forward to about being a dad? What are you worried about? And then the mums, it was more about the kind of, they're going into hospital, making sure that this and this and this is happening, and they were able to ask questions about the process. And, I'm not an NTT advocate particularly in terms of, I'm not paid by them, but I just...
No, I understand. But if your wife were to become pregnant again, would you say, come on, we must go to the NCT, or would you think you've learned all you can from it?
That's probably quite an interesting question. I don't know, actually, is the answer to that. But I would say that, to be fair, when we had our second, we didn't join the NCT again.
Okay. That's
but it was mainly because we kind of got, for our first time through, we got advice about breastfeeding and all that stuff, and advice about the sleeping thing, and we were much more prepared as parents.
Thank you, Andy. It's so important to provide balance. I don't want to, for one second, appear in the position of criticising the NCT. I know it provides a lot, but it's fair to have a conversation. Andy, best wishes to your wife and your children. Thank you for that. The conversation must move on. How grim this is, as we're talking about births. Freedom for the mother of baby Peter. I tackled Justice Secretary Dominic Raab about this yesterday.
Look, I remember that case vividly. As a father of young boys, I find it haunting. My views on this are very well known.
This is Breakfast at Leading Ferrari here on LBC. The 7:30 news is read by Simon Conway.
The head of GCHQ has claimed Vladimir Putin's advisors are afraid to tell him the truth about the progress of his invasion. Sir Jeremy Fleming says the Russian president had massively misjudged the situation. The UK says Russian forces have continued with significant shelling around the Ukrainian city of Chernihiv, despite promising they'd scale back activity. New analysis has found households will be more than £2,600 worse off because of the squeeze in the cost of living. The research by the Labour Party includes the rise in the tax